Right-wing extremist activities are on the rise. One of the most recent examples is the standoff with Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy. Ryan Lenz, who witnessed the Bundy standoff firsthand, is the co-author of a Southern Poverty Law Center report, War in the West, the Bundy Ranch Standoff and the American Radical Right. He joins us via Skype from Montgomery, Alabama. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Wow, you were out there when it was all going down. I got to ask you about that first. What was the atmosphere like? And did you ever feel, I don't know, that you were in danger at all?
Well, I think the situation was certainly escalating in a way that I think was apparent to everyone that it was leading toward a breaking point. It was absolutely fortuitous that I was there that day. I arrived in Las Vegas the night before and drove out to the Bundy Ranch that morning of April 12th, not knowing what was to happen. Expecting just to come upon gatherings of anti-government militia people, protesting like they'd been doing for weeks. And it just happened that on that day, Cliven Bundy had called Sheriff Doug Gillespie of Clark County, Nevada, to come meet with him. And it was that day that he issued his ultimatums and his demands, including disarming federal agents on public lands, thus putting in place, a series of events that led to the standoff several hours later.
I guess I was just so flummoxed that things could get as far as they did. I mean, this guy was defying the federal government. He was doing everything that, to me, if an African American did it, if an Hispanic did it, if a woman did it, we would be tossed in the nearest jail, hung in effigy. I mean, this guy got away with thumbing his nose at the federal government, and the federal government, Ryan, backed off.
Yes, they did, and they did so what the report that we've released, War in the West, says. Some of the major findings are that, one, what happened on April 12th was not as organic as it might have seemed. It was not spur of the moment. In fact, as you pointed out rightly, Cliven Bundy had been thumbing his nose not just at the federal government, but at the rulings of federal courts for many years. As for that day, the militaristic response from the militias was not organic. It had been planned out by a man named Ryan Payne, who visited the ranch a week prior, answering a call that Cliven Bundy had put out on his family blog for a range war. Ryan Payne was a former soldier. He had deployed to Iraq several times, and he came and essentially mapped out a military response to what the BLM might do if it came to what it ultimately did.
But I guess I'm very confused because, again, if a group of African Americans got together, defied the federal government the way this guy did, thumbed our nose at the government, put out an all call to have our buddies show up with armed, by the way, armed to the teeth, I don't think that we would have had the same outcome. The federal government backed off of this. You let another group of people do this, and it would be all-out war.
Absolutely. You have to remember that what happened in Nevada in April comes in the aftermath, many years removed, of course, but comes in the aftermath of some other very public federal events going terribly wrong. Waco is one, for example. Ruby Ridge is another. These are both events that drive the militia movement. They did in the 90s and certainly linger as memories as this militia movement surges back. And so on the 12th, when unexpectedly this mass of militia people, heavily armed to the teeth really, rushed toward this corral where the BLM has held Cliven Bundy's cattle against the fees and fines that he owes the federal government. I think they were a little taken aback. They didn't know what to expect. But as happened that day, Neil Cornsey has said, the director of the Bureau of Land Management, he said subsequently, citing conditions on the ground, they decided to end the cattle roundup. Fearing for a loss of life, they shut things down. But really what happened was a major success was given to the militia movement, to the anti-government movement across this country, because what the federal government allowed them to believe, at least, in standing down, was that, yes, with the proper amount of threat, you can suspend the rule of law. And that is something that I don't think anyone really anticipated happening that day.
Yeah, and you know, when I did hear that the federal government had backed down, I'm like, well, I do understand you don't want a Ruby Ridge. You don't want a situation like that. But there were people, quite frankly, who probably should have been arrested. I mean, you were there, Ryan, I wasn't, but people holding guns, there's law enforcement there trying to enforce the law. Other people have guns. I'm sure some guns were pointed at some law enforcement people, yet nobody went to jail behind this. Furthermore, I do want to get to this point that since the president was elected, these sort of extremist hate groups have gone from 150 groups to over 1,000 groups.
Right. Right. Well, you know, that growth in the Patriot anti-government movement has come, as we've said here, largely as a result of President Obama being elected, because what that represented to them, to the right wing, was a radical shift in demographics in this country, such that they had reason to be afraid, and so that you've seen more and more people flock to not only these militia groups and anti-government patriot groups, but you've seen mainstream politicians and pundits adopt conspiracy theories that have long lived on the radical right, and all of a sudden are suddenly appearing in mainstream discussion. For example, the Iowa Republican Party a number of years ago adopted an official party platform to deny or stand against any implementation of Agenda 21 in the state of Iowa. Agenda 21 is essentially a non-binding compact signed between over 100 countries that they were going to look at sustainable growth. It has no ramifications, no lasting efforts, no really enforcement mechanism. But all of a sudden, a major political party was fearful enough of an idea that they thought it necessary to put out an official platform on it.
Ryan Lenz with the Southern Poverty Law Center, co-author of War in the West, The Bundy Ranch Standoff, and the American Radical Right. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your insights. They are very, very valuable. Take good care.